In the heart of Manhattan, where steel towers pierce the clouds and millions of dreams collide on crowded sidewalks, there are stories that challenge everything we think we know about success, power, and what truly matters in life. This is one of those stories. A story about a man who had everything money could buy, but discovered he had nothing at all. A story about one night, one ride, and one woman who would shatter the carefully constructed walls of a billionaire's empty existence. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where are you watching this from? We love knowing that our stories reach people all over the world. And if you enjoy deep, emotional stories that make you think about life differently, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next incredible stories. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now let's begin. The rain hammered against the tinted windows of the Mercedes-Maybach S680 as it sat motionless in evening traffic on Fifth Avenue. Inside, Alexander Reed, 42 years old, CEO of Reed Ventures, with a net worth that Forbes estimated at $4.3 billion, stared at his phone with the same expression he used in boardroom negotiations: cold, calculating, emotionless. Another message from his assistant, another reminder about tomorrow's shareholders meeting. Another day that would be exactly like yesterday, and the day before that, and every day for the past 15 years. Alexander loosened his Italian silk tie and glanced at his driver, Matthews, who'd been with him for a decade. The man's eyes in the rearview mirror showed concern, but he knew better than to speak unless spoken to. "Matthews," Alexander said suddenly, his voice cutting through the silence. "When was the last time you felt alive?" The driver's eyes widened slightly. In 10 years, Mr. Reed had never asked him a personal question. "Sir? Alive. When did you last feel something real? Not comfortable, not secure, alive?" Matthews hesitated. I suppose when my daughter was born, sir. 23 years ago. 23 years. Alexander let that sink in. When was the last time he felt alive? He couldn't remember. Every day was a performance. Every interaction was transactional. Every relationship was strategic. He'd built an empire, yes, but somewhere along the way, he'd stopped living. The traffic began to move. Alexander made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone who knew him. "Pull over, sir. Pull over, Matthews. Now." The Maybach slid to the curb near Central Park. The rain had softened to a drizzle, and the city lights reflected off the wet pavement like scattered diamonds. Alexander stepped out of the car, and Matthews quickly followed, umbrella in hand. "Go home, Matthews." "Sir, I don't understand. I'm giving you the night off. Paid, of course. Go home to your family." Matthews looked genuinely worried now. "Mr. Reed, are you feeling all right? Should I call Dr. Morrison?" Alexander almost smiled. "Almost. I'm fine. I don't know what I need, but I need to find it alone." After Matthews reluctantly drove away, Alexander stood on the corner of 5th Avenue and 59th Street, his $3,000 suit getting damp from the mist. For the first time in years, he had no schedule, no handler, no security detail hovering nearby. He was just a man in a city of 8 million people. That's when he saw it. A silver Toyota Camry with a glowing rideshare decal in the window, parked across the street. The driver was scrolling through his phone, waiting for his next ride request. An idea formed in Alexander's mind. Reckless, absurd, exactly what he needed. He crossed the street and knocked on the driver's window. The young man couldn't have been more than 25, with tired eyes and the kind of worn expression that spoke of double shifts and mounting bills. Looked up, startled. Alexander pulled out his wallet and extracted a stack of $100 bills. He didn't count them. Didn't need to. There was at least $5,000 there. "I need your car for the night," Alexander said. "And your phone." The driver's eyes went wide. "Man, are you crazy? I can't." Alexander added another $5,000 to the pile. "One night. You can report it stolen if something happens, but nothing will. I'll return everything tomorrow morning plus another $10,000. All I need is one night driving around the city. No questions asked." The young man stared at the money. It was probably more than he made in 3 months. "This is insane." "Yes," Alexander agreed. "It is. Do we have a deal?" 5 minutes later, Alexander Reed, billionaire CEO, sat in the driver's seat of a 2018 Toyota Camry with 87,000 miles on it and a coffee stain on the passenger seat. The rideshare app glowed on the phone mounted to the dashboard. He was logged in as Marcus J. with a 4.9-star rating. He sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, feeling the weight of what he'd just done. This was madness. If the board found out, if the press found out, if anyone found out that Alexander Reed was driving around Manhattan pretending to be a rideshare driver, the app pinged. A ride request. Pickup location, St. Luke's Hospital. Destination, Brooklyn Heights. Alexander's finger hovered over the accept button. Last chance to back out. Last chance to return to sanity. He pressed accept. The rain had picked up again by the time he pulled up to the hospital's main entrance. Under the harsh, fluorescent lights, he could see a woman in scrubs sitting on a bench, her head in her hands. Even from a distance, he could see the exhaustion radiating from her. He pulled up and rolled down the window. Ride for Sarah? The woman looked up, and Alexander felt something shift in his chest. She was probably in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, no makeup, and the kind of face that would have been beautiful if it weren't so obviously drained. But it was her eyes that caught him, deep brown, intelligent, and carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too much suffering. "That's me," she said, standing with visible effort. She grabbed a worn backpack and slid into the back seat. "Brooklyn Heights, please." Montague Street. "Rough day?" Alexander asked as he pulled into traffic. The question felt foreign on his tongue. When was the last time he'd asked someone about their day and actually wanted to know the answer? "Rough doesn't begin to cover it," Sarah said, her voice hoarse. She leaned her head against the window. "Sorry, I don't mean to be rude. It's been a very long shift." "You're a nurse, ER nurse. 16 hours today. We're short-staffed. And it feels like the whole city decided to have emergencies all at once." She let out a bitter laugh. "But hey, at least I have a job, right? That's what everyone keeps telling me." Alexander glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You don't sound convinced. You ever feel like you're running as fast as you can just to stay in the same place?" Sarah asked. She seemed to realize she was opening up to a stranger and shook her head. "Sorry, you don't need to hear about my problems. You probably deal with enough of everyone else's issues." "Actually," Alexander said, surprising himself, "I'd like to hear about it, if you want to talk." Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was the anonymity of confiding in a stranger she'd never see again. But Sarah started talking. She told him about the 17-year-old gunshot victim who died on her table today, about the elderly woman with dementia who kept calling Sarah by her dead daughter's name, about the medical debt that was crushing her despite working 60-hour weeks, about the healthcare system that seemed designed to break the people trying to hold it together. "I went into nursing because I wanted to help people," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And I do. I really do. But nobody tells you about the cost, the emotional weight of watching people suffer when you don't have enough resources to help them all, the financial weight of student loans that feel impossible to escape, the guilt of being too tired to be there for your own family because you're taking care of everyone else's." Alexander drove in silence for a moment, processing her words. He'd donated millions to hospitals over the years. Tax-deductible charity. Good PR. But he'd never thought about the people like Sarah, the ones on the front lines drowning in debt despite literally saving lives. "You have family?" he asked. "A younger brother, Tommy. He's 16. Her voice softened. "Our parents died in a car accident 4 years ago. Drunk driver. I've been raising him since then. Trying to, anyway. Between work and just surviving, I feel like I'm failing him. I'm sure you're not." "He got suspended from school last week for fighting," Sarah interrupted. "The counselor says he's angry. Acting out. He needs therapy, but guess what? Our insurance doesn't cover mental health, and I can't afford to pay out of pocket. So I just keep telling him to hang in there. Be strong. Don't worry about money. Like that's supposed to fix everything." She laughed again, that same bitter sound. "You know what the worst part is? I know exactly how to help him. I know what resources he needs. But knowing doesn't matter when you can't afford it. It's like being a mechanic who can diagnose exactly what's wrong with a car, but doesn't have the parts to fix it." Alexander pulled up to a red light in downtown Brooklyn. The neighborhood was gentrifying. He could see the expensive organic grocery store next to the check-cashing place, the artisan coffee shop across from the laundromat. Two worlds colliding. "Where do you live?" he asked. "Third floor walk-up, 2 blocks from here. It's small, but it's ours. For now anyway. Rent keeps going up, and I keep wondering how much longer we can hold on." The light turned green. Alexander made a decision. "I'm going to do something, and I need you not to question it," he said. "Can you do that?" Sarah looked at him warily in the rearview mirror. "What do you mean?" "Just trust me, please." He took a left turn instead of going straight. Sarah sat up. "Wait, where are you going?" "Montague Street is back that way." "I know. We're making a stop first." 10 minutes later, Alexander pulled up to an all-night diner in Park Slope. It was the kind of place he'd normally never notice. Worn red vinyl booths, flickering neon sign, steam fogging up the windows. "Come on," he said, turning off the engine. "I don't understand. Have you eaten today?" Sarah blinked. No, I grabbed coffee around noon, but then we're eating, and we're talking, and you're going to let me buy you dinner without arguing. I can't ask you to." "You didn't ask. I'm offering. There's a difference." Something in his voice made her stop protesting. Maybe it was the gentle authority, Or maybe she was just too tired to argue. She followed him into the diner. They slid into a booth near the back. A waitress who looked like she'd been working there since the Reagan administration came over. Notepad ready. "What can I get you folks?" "Whatever she wants," Alexander said. "And coffee. Lots of coffee." Sarah ordered a burger and fries. Comfort food. The kind she probably never let herself indulge in. Alexander ordered the same, even though he couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten something that wasn't prepared by a private chef or served at a five-star restaurant. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah asked, once the waitress left. "You don't know me." Alexander considered the question. Why was he doing this? "Because I spent the last 15 years of my life forgetting what it means to be human," he said finally. "And talking to you for 20 minutes reminded me." Sarah studied him with those intelligent brown eyes. "You're not really a rideshare driver, are you?" Alexander felt his heart skip. "What makes you say that? Your hands. No calluses. Your watch. You keep your sleeve pulled down. But I saw it when you turned the wheel. That's a Patek Philippe." "I know because one of the cardiac surgeons at the hospital has one. He likes to brag that it cost more than my car. Your posture, the way you speak, even the way you apologize to another driver who cut you off. Everything about you screams money." Alexander sat back, genuinely impressed. "You're very observant." "I'm a nurse. Observing details is literally my job. People's lives depend on it." She leaned forward. "So who are you really? And why are you slumming it as a rideshare driver?" The waitress returned with their coffee, giving Alexander a moment to think. He could lie, should lie, but something about this woman, her directness, her honesty, her complete lack of pretense, made him want to tell the truth. "My name is Alexander Reed," he said quietly. "I'm the CEO of Reed Ventures, and I'm pretending to be a rideshare driver because I woke up this morning and realized I couldn't remember the last time I did something that wasn't calculated, strategic, or designed to increase shareholder value. I wanted one night of being nobody, of being invisible, of being real." Sarah's eyes widened. "Alexander Reed, as in the Alexander Reed, the billionaire?" "Unfortunately." She sat back, processing. "So this is what? Some kind of undercover boss situation? Are there cameras? Is this going to end up on some reality show where you give me a check and we all feel good about wealth inequality?" "No cameras. No show. Just me, trying to remember what it felt like to connect with another human being without an agenda." "Must be nice," Sarah said, and there was an edge to her voice now. "To be able to play at being poor for a night. To slum it with the working class, and then go back to your penthouse and your private jet and your life where you never have to worry about whether you can afford groceries and rent in the same week." The words stung because they were true. "You're right," Alexander said. "I'm sorry. This was selfish. I'll pay for your meal and take you home. I shouldn't have." "No." Sarah held up a hand. "I'm sorry. That wasn't fair. You're buying me dinner and actually listening to me talk about my life, which is more than most people do. I'm just tired and angry, and I'm taking it out on you. You have every right to be angry, maybe, but anger doesn't pay the bills." The food arrived and Sarah picked up a fry, studying it like it held the answers to life's mysteries. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you ever feel guilty about having so much when so many people have so little?" Alexander looked down at his burger. "Every day, or at least I used to. Somewhere along the way, I stopped letting myself feel it. It was easier to rationalize. I create jobs. I donate to charity. I pay my taxes. Well, the ones I can't legally avoid anyway. I told myself I'd earned my success through hard work and smart decisions. But tonight, listening to you talk about working 16-hour shifts and still struggling to make rent, still unable to afford therapy for your brother, I realized that all my rationalizations are just comfortable lies I tell myself so I can sleep at night. So what are you going to do about it?" It was a challenge, plain and simple. Alexander respected that. "I don't know," he admitted. "Writing you a check would make me feel better, but it wouldn't solve anything. The system that's crushing you would still be there, crushing millions of others. But you have the power to change the system," Sarah said. "People like you, the billionaires, the CEOs, the people who fund political campaigns and lobby lawmakers. You could actually make a difference if you wanted to. And if I fail, if I try to change things and get pushed out, someone else takes my place? Someone who might be worse? So that's it? You do nothing because trying might be hard?" The words hit like a punch to the gut. How many times had he used that same logic in board meetings? How many times had he prioritized stability over change, comfort over courage? "When my parents died," Sarah said, her voice softer now, "I had a choice. I could put Tommy in foster care and finish nursing school without the burden of raising a teenager, or I could take him in, knowing it would make everything harder. A lot of people told me to choose the easier path. They said I was too young, too broke, too unprepared. And they were right. I was all those things. But you took him in anyway. Because doing the right thing isn't about being ready or having perfect conditions. It's about deciding what matters and refusing to back down. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. She met his eyes. You have more power and resources than I could ever dream of. If someone like me can choose to do hard things every single day, what's your excuse? Alexander sat in silence, letting her words sink in. This woman, this exhausted, broke, magnificent woman, had just given him the verbal equivalent of a slap across the face, and he was grateful for it. You're right, he said finally. I've been hiding behind excuses for years. Maybe my whole life. So stop hiding. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. Not easy. Simple. There's a difference. Alexander found himself smiling, genuinely smiling, for the first time in months. You should be a motivational speaker. Can't afford the platform shoes, Sarah quipped, and they both laughed. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily despite their vastly different worlds. Sarah told him about the time Tommy won his middle school science fair with a project about renewable energy. Alexander told her about dropping out of Harvard to start his first company, much to his parents' horror. She shared her dream of one day opening a free clinic in underserved neighborhoods. He admitted that he couldn't remember the last time he'd had a dream that wasn't about profit margins. What happened to you? Sarah asked gently. You weren't always like this. Nobody starts out wanting to be empty. Alexander stared into his coffee cup, seeing his reflection distorted in the dark liquid. My father, he said finally. He was a real estate developer, ruthless. He used to say that sentiment was a luxury for people who couldn't afford to win. When I was 12, our neighbor, an elderly man who'd been on our street for 40 years, couldn't pay his mortgage. My father bought the house at auction and evicted him. The man ended up dying in a shelter 6 months later. That's horrible. I asked my father how he could do that. He said, Alexander, in this world, you're either the hammer or the nail. I'm teaching you to be the hammer. So that's what I became. I hammered my way through business school, hammered my way through startup funding, hammered my way to the top, and somewhere along the way, I forgot that there were other options, that you could be human without being crushed. Your father was wrong, Sarah said firmly. The world isn't divided into hammers and nails. Most of us are just people trying to get by, trying to help each other when we can. The fact that you're sitting here right now, questioning everything, means you're not your father. I'm not sure what I am anymore. Maybe that's okay. Maybe not knowing is the first step to figuring it out. Alexander paid the bill, leaving a $100 tip that made the waitress do a double take, and they walked back to the car. The rain had stopped, and the Brooklyn streets gleamed under the streetlights. It was nearly midnight, and the city had that quiet energy that only emerges in the small hours. Can I ask you something else? Sarah said as they drove toward her apartment. Of course. Why me? You could have picked up anyone tonight. Why did my story matter? Alexander thought about this. Because you reminded me of someone I used to be, or maybe someone I wanted to be before I let fear and ambition corrupt it. You're fighting for something that matters. Not money, not power, people, your brother, your patience. You're exhausted and broke and barely holding on, but you haven't given up. That's heroic in a way I'll never be. I'm not a hero, Sarah said quietly. I'm just doing what needs to be done. That's what makes it heroic. He pulled up to her building, a tired brick walk-up with graffiti on the mailboxes and a broken security door. Sarah gathered her backpack, preparing to leave, and Alexander felt a sudden panic. This conversation, this connection, it couldn't end. Not yet. Wait, he said. Would you let me help? Not with money. Well, not just money. Would you let me actually do something that matters? Sarah turned to look at him, and in the dim light of the car, her expression was unreadable. What did you have in mind? I don't know yet, but I want to find out. I want to understand what people like you actually need, not what people like me think you need. Would you be willing to show me? To let me into your world for a while? Why? So you can feel better about yourself? So you can check help the poor people off your bucket list? No, because I think you might be the first person in 15 years to tell me the truth without an agenda, and I need more of that in my life. I need to remember what matters. Sarah studied him for a long moment. Okay, she said finally, but I have conditions. You don't get to swoop in like some savior and fix everything with your money. You don't get to treat my life like a charity case or a social experiment. If you want to understand, you have to actually do the work. Show up, listen, learn. Can you do that? Yes. And when you inevitably get tired of playing poor and want to go back to your comfortable life, you don't just disappear. You tell me, honestly, no ghosting. Deal? Deal. Sarah held out her hand and they shook on it. Her grip was firm, her palms calloused from work. Real hands, real person, real life. I work the ER tomorrow night, 7 to 7, she said. If you're serious about this, meet me at St. Luke's at 6:45. I'll get you a visitor badge. You can shadow me for a shift. See what it's really like. I'll be there. We'll see. Sarah opened the door, then paused. Thank you for dinner. And for listening. It's been a long time since anyone did that. Thank you for reminding me how to be human, she smiled. A real smile that transformed her exhausted face into something luminous. And then she was gone, disappearing into the building. Alexander sat in the car for a long time, watching the light flicker on in a third-floor window. He could see Sarah's silhouette moving around the small apartment. Such a small space, such a huge life contained within it. He picked up the rideshare phone and scrolled through Marcus's ride history. 143 rides in the past month. That was over 4 rides a day. Every day, each little payment barely making a dent in whatever debts and expenses Marcus was fighting. Alexander thought about his own empire. Reed Ventures, 14 companies under the umbrella. Real estate development, tech startups, medical supply chains, each one optimized for maximum profit. Each one, he realized with growing horror, likely contributing to the system that was crushing people like Sarah and Marcus. His medical supply company charged hospitals premium prices for basic equipment. His real estate development company had gentrified 3 Brooklyn neighborhoods in the past 5 years, pushing out longtime residents. His tech startups were built on gig economy models that left workers without benefits or security. He'd spent 15 years building an empire, and tonight, a tired nurse had shown him that his empire was built on the backs of people like her. The revelation should have been crushing. Instead, Alexander felt something he hadn't felt in years. Possibility, the chance to be someone different, someone better. He drove back to Manhattan, returned Marcus's car and phone with an extra $10,000 in the glove compartment, and caught a taxi back to his penthouse. The doorman greeted him with confusion. Mr. Reed never took taxis, but said nothing. The penthouse was exactly as he'd left it. 2,300 square feet of minimalist luxury overlooking Central Park. Every surface pristine, every piece of furniture designer, every artwork carefully selected by an interior decorator he'd met exactly once. It was beautiful, empty, dead. Alexander stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, Sarah was probably lying awake, worrying about bills and her brother, and whether she'd have the strength to face another shift tomorrow. Somewhere out there, millions of people were fighting their own battles, grinding through their own struggles. And until tonight, Alexander had been completely disconnected from all of it. He called his assistant. It was nearly 2 a.m., but she answered on the second ring. That's what he paid her for. Mr. Reed, is everything all right? Cancel my morning meetings. All of them. Sir, you have the shareholders meeting at 9. I said cancel them. Reschedule for next week. I have something more important to do. More important than the shareholders meeting? Yes, much more important. He hung up before she could respond. Then he spent the rest of the night researching hospital staffing shortages, nursing school debt statistics, and the economics of emergency medicine. By sunrise, he'd filled 2 legal pads with notes, and his eyes burned from staring at screens. But he understood now. He understood the system Sarah was trapped in, and more importantly, he understood how his companies were profiting from that system. At 6:30 p.m. the next evening, Alexander Reed, dressed in jeans and a simple button-down shirt that probably still cost more than Marcus made in a week, stood outside St. Luke's Hospital. His hands were sweating. His heart was racing. He felt like a teenager on a first date. Sarah emerged from the entrance at 6:43. 2 minutes early. She looked surprised to see him. You actually came. I said I would. Yeah, well, rich people say a lot of things, but she was smiling. Come on, I'll get you that visitor badge. And fair warning, it's going to be rough in there. If you're going to pass out or have a panic attack at the sight of blood, tell me now. I'll be fine. Famous last words. The ER was chaos. Controlled chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Ambulance sirens wailed outside. Patients moaned in pain. Staff rushed from room to room, their movements efficient despite the obvious exhaustion. The air smelled of antiseptic and fear. Sarah transformed the moment she stepped through those doors. The exhaustion didn't disappear, but it was overlaid with focus, competence, absolute command. This was her domain. Stay close and stay out of the way, she instructed. Don't touch anything. Don't talk to patients unless I specifically tell you it's okay. And if I tell you to leave a room, you leave immediately. Understood? Understood. For the next 12 hours, Alexander witnessed a world he'd never imagined. He watched Sarah hold the hand of an elderly man while he died, his family stuck in traffic, unable to make it in time. He watched her patiently explain to a mother with limited English why her son needed emergency surgery. He watched her cover for an intern who made a mistake, taking the blame herself, so the young doctor wouldn't be penalized. He watched her run from room to room, barely pausing to grab water or use the bathroom. He watched her calm a schizophrenic patient who was having a psychotic episode, her voice gentle and reassuring even as the man swung at her. He watched her console a rape victim, her eyes fierce with protective anger, and he watched the system fail her over and over again. A patient who needed a CT scan but couldn't afford it, sent home with pain medication and prayers. A diabetic who'd been rationing insulin and was now in ketoacidosis. A homeless man with a severe infection who would be back on the street in 12 hours because there were no beds in the shelter system. A domestic violence victim who refused to press charges because she had nowhere else to go. Sarah handled each case with compassion and professionalism, but Alexander could see the toll it took. The way her shoulders tensed with each impossible situation. The way her jaw clenched when she had to deliver bad news. The way she'd step into the supply closet for 30 seconds just to breathe. Around 3 a.m., during a brief lull, Sarah found him sitting in the break room, his head in his hands. "You okay?" she asked. "How do you do this every day?" Alexander looked up at her. "How do you keep going when the system is so fundamentally broken? Because the alternative is giving up. And if I give up, people die." She poured herself coffee from a pot that looked like it had been sitting there since yesterday. "You see it now, don't you? What I was trying to tell you. It's worse than I imagined. And this is one hospital in one city. It's like this everywhere. Nurses leaving the profession because they can't take it anymore. Patients suffering because they can't afford care. The whole thing held together by underpaid, overworked people who care too much to walk away." "Your medical supply company," she continued, and Alexander flinched. "They charged us $4,000 for a piece of equipment last month. I looked it up. The actual manufacturing cost? About $800. You're making a 3,000% profit while we're rationing supplies and telling patients we can't help them. I didn't know." "Yes, you did. Maybe not the specific numbers, but you knew. People like you always know. You just don't let yourself think about it." She wasn't wrong. Alexander had approved those pricing structures himself, justified by market analysis and shareholder expectations. He'd never once thought about the human cost. "I want to change it," he said. "Not just my company, the whole system, but I don't know where to start." Sarah sat down across from him. "You start by actually listening to the people living in it, not bringing in consultants or analysts or people like you who went to the same schools and belong to the same clubs. You talk to nurses and patients and janitors and social workers. You ask what we need, and then you actually give it to us instead of what you think we need. And if other companies don't follow, if I change my practices, and my competitors don't, then you use your influence to push for regulation. You lobby for laws that prevent exploitation. You use your money and power for something other than accumulating more money and power." She leaned forward. "Or you can keep making excuses, keep telling yourself that one person can't make a difference, keep collecting your billions while people suffer. It's your choice." A call came over the PA system. "Trauma team to Bay 3, GSW to the chest, ETA 2 minutes. Sarah was on her feet instantly. "I have to go. Can I?" "No. This one's going to be bad. Wait here." She was gone before he could respond. Alexander sat alone in the break room, surrounded by motivational posters that felt obscene, given the reality he'd just witnessed. Teamwork makes the dream work. Every patient matters. Committed to excellence. Empty words. Corporate platitudes designed to make people feel better about an impossible situation. His phone buzzed. 18 missed calls from his assistant. 47 emails marked urgent. A text from his CFO. "Where are you? Board is losing their minds." Alexander turned off his phone. 20 minutes later, Sarah returned. Her scrubs were spattered with blood. Her eyes were red. She didn't say anything, just stood in the doorway, her body language radiating exhaustion and grief. "Did they make it?" Alexander asked quietly. Sarah shook her head. 14 years old. Wrong place, wrong time. Caught in crossfire between two gangs, fighting over territory that doesn't even belong to them. She slumped into a chair. "His mother just got here. I had to tell her that her baby is dead, that she needs to come identify the body. That's the 3rd time this month I've had to do that. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't bring him back. Sorry doesn't stop the next kid from getting shot. Sorry doesn't fix anything." She looked at him with those fierce, exhausted eyes. But money could. Real investment in these communities. Jobs programs, after-school activities, mental health resources, violence interruption programs, all the things that study after study has shown actually work, but nobody wants to fund because it's easier to just lock people up and pretend the problem is solved. What if I funded those programs? With what? Your pocket change? $1 million donation that gets you a plaque and a tax write-off? That might save a few kids. But it doesn't change the system that's creating the problem in the first place. Then what should I do? Alexander asked, and he meant it. For the first time in his adult life, he genuinely didn't know the answer and desperately needed someone to tell him. Sarah studied him for a long moment. You really want to know? Yes. Use your power to change policy. You have access to lawmakers and lobbyists and the levers of power that people like me will never touch. Push for universal health care. Support housing first initiatives. Fund education. Fight for a living wage. Not because it makes you look good or gets you good PR, but because it's the right thing to do. Even when, especially when, it costs you money. Alexander nodded slowly. The magnitude of what she was asking hit him like a freight train. She wasn't asking for charity. She was asking for revolution, a complete restructuring of how he thought about business, success, and his role in the world. I'll do it, he said. Just like that? Just like that. Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. You say that now. Wait until you're in a board meeting and they're threatening to replace you. Wait until your profit margins drop and your shareholders revolt. Wait until every billionaire friend you have calls you a traitor. Then we'll see if you still mean it. I'll mean it. We'll see. Her shift ended at 7 a.m. Alexander walked with her out of the hospital, into a gray dawn that matched the exhaustion on both their faces. The city was waking up, delivery trucks rumbling past, early commuters shuffling toward the subway. A homeless man digging through a trash can for breakfast. Thank you for letting me shadow you, Alexander said. It was eye-opening, doesn't begin to cover it. Thank you for not passing out or getting in the way. Sarah adjusted her backpack, wincing slightly. You going back to your penthouse now? Back to your real life? Not yet. I'd like to meet Tommy, if that's okay. Sarah stopped walking. Why? Because he's important to you. And I want to understand your world, not just the hospital part. Is he home? Should be. He's supposed to be getting ready for school. But honestly, I'll be lucky if he's even awake. She hesitated. Fair warning. He's not going to like you. He doesn't trust rich people. Says they're all parasites who got wealthy by exploiting people like us. Smart kid. Too smart for his own good sometimes. They took the subway to Brooklyn. Alexander's first time on public transportation in over a decade. The morning rush was building, bodies pressed together. The air thick with the smell of coffee and humanity. A woman with 3 small children struggled with a stroller. A man in a wheelchair navigated the crowded car with practiced efficiency. Teenagers in school uniforms laughed and shoved each other. This was New York. The real New York. Not the sanitized, luxury version Alexander inhabited, but the grinding, struggling, beautiful reality of millions of people just trying to survive another day. Sarah's apartment was exactly what Alexander expected and somehow worse. The building's hallway smelled of cooking oil and mildew. The walls were thin enough that he could hear a baby crying 2 doors down, a couple arguing in Spanish above them. Inside, the apartment was clean but cramped, a kitchen barely big enough for one person, a living room with a sagging couch and a TV that had to be at least 15 years old, 2 bedrooms, one slightly larger than a closet. A teenage boy sat at a small table, eating cereal and scrolling through his phone. He looked up when they entered, and Alexander saw Sarah's eyes in a younger, angrier face. You're late, Tommy said. I thought maybe you'd died or something. Nice to see you too, Sarah replied, dropping her backpack by the door. I brought someone. This is Alexander. He's a friend. Tommy's eyes swept over Alexander. The expensive jeans, the watch he'd forgotten to take off, the general air of wealth that was apparently impossible to hide. A friend, right. What's he want, Sarah? Money? You got a secret rich boyfriend you've been hiding? Tommy, no, it's fine, Alexander interrupted. He pulled out a chair and sat down across from Tommy. You're right to be suspicious. Your sister told me you're smart, and smart people don't trust strangers. Especially rich ones who show up at their apartment at 7 in the morning. Tommy's eyes narrowed. So you admit you're rich? Very, and I admit that people like me are part of the reason people like you and your sister are struggling. The system is rigged in my favor, and I've been benefiting from that my whole life without thinking about who it was hurting. And now you feel guilty? So you're here to throw money at us and feel better about yourself? No, I'm here because your sister is trying to teach me how to be a better person. And I'm a slow learner. I need all the help I can get. Tommy looked at Sarah. Is he for real? I honestly don't know yet, Sarah admitted. But he spent 12 hours in the ER last night without complaining once. So he's either genuine or an incredibly committed liar. What do you want with us? Tommy asked, turning back to Alexander. I want to learn. I want to understand what it's really like to live in a system that I helped create. And then I want to change that system. Change it how? I don't know yet. That's what I need to figure out. But I can't do it alone. I need people who understand what's actually broken, not what people like me think is broken. Tommy studied him for a long moment, then went back to his cereal. You're going to disappoint her, you know. Rich people always do. They come in with big promises and good intentions. Then they get bored or scared, or their accountant tells them it's bad for business, and they disappear. Sarah doesn't need that. She's got enough people disappointing her. The words hit harder than any boardroom attack Alexander had ever faced. Because Tommy was right. How many times had Alexander made promises he didn't keep? How many initiatives had he started and abandoned? How many people had he let down because following through was inconvenient? You're absolutely right, Alexander said. I have a history of starting things and not finishing them. Of choosing comfort over commitment. Of being, as you put it, a parasite. But I'm trying to be different. And if I screw up, when I screw up, I hope you'll call me on it. Oh, I will. Tommy promised. Count on it. Sarah poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter. Tommy, go get ready for school. And actually go this time. I'll know if you skip. How? Because I'm your sister, and I know everything. Now go. Tommy grabbed his backpack and headed to his room, but paused in the doorway. Hey, rich guy, if you hurt my sister, I'll make your life hell. I don't care how much money you have. Fair enough, Alexander replied. After Tommy left for school, reluctantly, but he left, Sarah collapsed on the couch. I have about 3 hours before I need to sleep, and then I work another shift tonight. You should probably go. I'm not very good company when I'm this tired. Can I ask you something first? Sure. What would actually help? Not theoretically. Right now. Today. What would make your life easier? Sarah laughed. Besides winning the lottery? I don't know. A day off? A raise? Tommy in therapy? Our hot water working consistently? Rent I could actually afford? Pick any one of those and it would feel like a miracle. What if you had all of them? Then I'd probably cry, but that's not reality. Alexander pulled out his phone and made several calls. Sarah watched with growing confusion as he arranged for a plumber to come to the building that afternoon, as he scheduled an appointment with one of the city's best adolescent therapists, who apparently owed him a favor and agreed to take Tommy pro bono, as he transferred money to pay the next 6 months of Sarah's rent directly to her landlord. What are you doing? Sarah asked. Buying myself time, Alexander said. You're going to tell me I can't just throw money at your problems, and you're right. But I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove I'm serious. These aren't solutions, they're band-aids, but maybe they'll give you enough breathing room to actually rest, to focus on Tommy, to not be drowning every single second. I can't accept this. You can and you will. Not because I'm rich and you're not. Not because I feel guilty, but because you spend every day helping people who can't help themselves, and someone needs to do the same for you. Consider it payment for the education you're giving me. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Why are you doing this? Because yesterday, I realized my life was empty, successful, powerful, wealthy, and completely empty. And you, exhausted, broke, overwhelmed you, reminded me what it means to have purpose, to fight for something beyond yourself. I'm doing this because you're saving my life just as much as I'm trying to help yours. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Probably, but it's true. Sarah wiped her eyes. If this is some kind of Pretty Woman fantasy where the rich guy rescues the poor girl and she falls in love with him, I'm going to punch you in the throat. Noted. No throat punching necessary. This isn't about romance. It's about, I don't even know what it's about. Redemption. Maybe, or just remembering how to be human. You're weird, I'm aware. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. The baby next door had stopped crying. Someone was playing salsa music down the hall. The city hummed and breathed around them. I should let you sleep, Alexander said, standing. But can I come back? Maybe meet Tommy after school if he's willing. I'd like to hear what he thinks needs to change. Teenage perspective is something I definitely don't have. He's going to be impossible about this. Good. I need impossible right now. I've been surrounded by yes men for too long. Sarah walked him to the door. Alexander? Yeah, don't make promises you can't keep. I mean it. I can handle a lot of things, but I can't handle getting Tommy's hopes up just to have them crushed. He's been through too much already. I understand. And Sarah, thank you for everything. I haven't done anything. You've done more than you know. Alexander left the apartment and stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to Sarah lock the door behind him. Then he pulled out his phone and made another call. Marcus, it's the guy from last night. The one who rented your car. Yeah, I know it was weird. Listen, I have a proposition for you. 45 minutes later, Alexander sat in a coffee shop in Park Slope with Marcus, the real rideshare driver, across from him. So let me get this straight, Marcus said, cradling his coffee like it was precious. You want to hire me as a consultant? Yes, $50,000 for 3 months of your time. I want you to show me what it's really like to work in the gig economy. Introduce me to other drivers, delivery people, service workers. Help me understand the system from the inside. Why? Because I'm trying to change how my companies operate. And I can't do that without understanding the people affected by my decisions. You have knowledge I need. I'm willing to pay for it. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. This is insane. You're insane. Possibly. But is that a yes? Man, for 50 grand I'd consult with the devil himself. When do we start? Today, right now. I want you to take me to wherever drivers hang out. I want to meet the people who work for companies like mine. I want to hear their stories. Marcus grinned. Oh, this is going to be fun. They're going to eat you alive. Good. I deserve it. For the next 2 weeks, Alexander Reed disappeared from his normal life. He didn't go to the office. He didn't attend board meetings. He didn't return calls from his CFO, his lawyers, or his increasingly panicked assistant. Instead, he spent his days shadowing rideshare drivers, listening to delivery workers complain about impossible quotas, sitting in on union organizing meetings, attending community forums about gentrification. He met janitors who worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford health care. He met teachers buying school supplies with their own money because their budgets had been cut. He met parents working opposite shifts, so someone was always home with their kids, never spending time together as a family. And every evening, he'd show up at Sarah's apartment around 4 p.m., before she left for her night shift. He'd help Tommy with homework, discovering that the kid was brilliant at math, but struggling with reading comprehension because he'd missed so much school dealing with grief and anger. They'd talk about everything from music to politics to what Tommy wanted to be when he grew up. A civil rights lawyer, Tommy said one evening. I want to sue people like you who exploit people like us. That's a great goal, Alexander said seriously. You'll need good grades to get into law school. Want me to help you study? Why would you help me sue people like you? Because the world needs more people like you in positions of power. And because your sister is right. The system needs to change. And having smart, angry people fighting from the inside is how it happens. On day 16 of his disappearance, Alexander's CFO showed up at Sarah's apartment building. He must have hired a private investigator to find him. Alexander? Richard Pearson was red-faced and sweating despite the cool October air. What the hell is going on? The board is threatening to remove you. Shareholders are panicking. The stock price has dropped 8%. You need to come back right now. Alexander was sitting on the front stoop with Tommy, reviewing algebra homework. He looked up calmly. No. What do you mean, no? I mean, I'm not coming back. Not yet. Not until I finish what I started. And what exactly did you start? Living in poverty? Playing at being poor? This is insane, Alexander. You have responsibilities, billions of dollars in responsibilities. Tommy stood up, all teenage righteous anger. He's not playing at anything. He's learning. Maybe you should try it sometime. Richard looked at Tommy like he was an exotic species. Who are you? Someone who actually works for a living, unlike you parasites. Alexander, are you going to let this child? This child has taught me more about economics in 2 weeks than Harvard Business School did in 2 years. Alexander interrupted. And he's right. We are parasites. And I'm done being one. Richard's face went from red to purple. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to the office and tell the board that I'm taking a sabbatical for personal development. 30 days. If they want to remove me, they can try. But I still have controlling interest. And when I come back, things are going to change. Change how? Reed Medical Supply is cutting prices by 60%. Reed Properties is implementing rent control in all our buildings and stopping all eviction proceedings while we review our policies. Reed Tech is converting all contractors to full employees with benefits. And we're going to start lobbying for universal healthcare, affordable housing, and living wage legislation. Richard looked like he was having a heart attack. That will cost us hundreds of millions, possibly billions. The board will never approve it. Then I'll do it anyway and deal with the consequences. I'd rather be poor and able to sleep at night than rich and knowing I'm destroying lives for profit. You've lost your mind. No. I've found it. For the first time in 15 years, I actually know what I'm doing and why it matters. Richard looked at Tommy, then back at Alexander. This is because of them, isn't it? These people, they've gotten into your head. These people have names. This is Tommy. His sister Sarah is an ER nurse who works 60-hour weeks and still struggles to pay rent. They didn't get into my head. They reminded me that I have a heart. There's a difference. The board won't let you destroy what you built. I'm not destroying it. I'm fixing it. I built an empire on exploitation and called it success. Now I'm going to rebuild it on fairness and call it responsibility. They can come along or get out of the way. Richard opened his mouth, closed it, then turned and walked away. muttering about lawyers and mental health evaluations. Tommy watched him go. That was awesome. But you know he's right, don't you? They're going to try to remove you. Probably. And you're okay with that? I'm more than okay with it. I'm counting on it. Because when they try to remove me for treating workers fairly and charging fair prices, it's going to make national news. And then we're going to have a very public conversation about why treating people with basic human decency is considered radical and bad for business. Tommy grinned. You're crazier than I thought. I like it. That evening, Sarah came home early from her shift. Someone had actually showed up to cover for her, a rarity, and found Alexander and Tommy in the kitchen, attempting to make dinner. What is happening? She asked, surveying the chaos. Every pot and pan they owned was dirty. Something was burning. Tommy was laughing so hard he couldn't breathe. We're making spaghetti, Alexander announced proudly. Or at least that was the intention. I think we've actually created some kind of Italian-themed disaster. You've never cooked before, have you? I've had people cook for me. It's not the same thing. Sarah couldn't help but laugh. These two, her angry, brilliant brother and this weird, wealthy man who was trying so hard to understand a life he'd never lived, covered in flour and tomato sauce, looking ridiculously pleased with themselves despite the disaster around them. Come on, she said. Let me show you how it's actually done. They cooked together, the three of them in that tiny kitchen, and it was chaotic and messy and perfect. Sarah taught Alexander how to properly boil pasta. Tommy told a story about a fight at school that he'd actually walked away from instead of joining. Alexander talked about his confrontation with Richard and the coming battle with his board. You don't have to do this, Sarah said quietly as they ate the spaghetti, which turned out surprisingly good despite the rough start. You don't owe us anything. I'm not doing it for you, Alexander replied. I'm doing it because it's right. You just help me see that. But you could lose everything. I could. Probably will lose a lot of it. But I've had everything, Sarah. I've had more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I've had power and influence and every material thing a person could want. And I was miserable, empty, dying inside while pretending to be alive. He put down his fork and looked at both of them. These past 2 weeks, eating takeout on your couch, helping Tommy with homework, learning what it's actually like to struggle and fight and care about something bigger than yourself. I've felt more alive than I have in 15 years. If I have to choose between my empire and my humanity, I'm choosing humanity, every time. Tommy and Sarah exchanged glances. Some silent sibling communication passed between them. Okay, Sarah said finally. But when your board fires you, and you end up broke, don't come crying to us. This apartment barely fits 2 people, duly noted. And you're cleaning up this kitchen, all of it. Fair enough. As Alexander washed dishes in their tiny sink, a task he'd never performed in his adult life, Tommy's voice came from behind him. Hey, Alexander? Yeah, thanks. For everything. Even if it all falls apart. Thanks for trying. Alexander felt something break open in his chest. You're welcome, kid. Thank you for not letting me stay comfortable. The next morning, Alexander returned to Reed Ventures for the first time in over 2 weeks. The office was exactly as he'd left it. Sleek, modern, intimidating. Everyone stared as he walked through, whispers following him like a wake. His assistant nearly fainted with relief. Mr. Reed, thank God you're back. The board is meeting in conference room A. They've been waiting for you. Let them wait a little longer. I need to make some calls first. He shut himself in his office and spent the next hour on the phone with every major media outlet in New York. By the time he walked into the board meeting, he'd given exclusive interviews to The Times, The Post, and 3 major news networks. The board was exactly what he expected. 12 men and 3 women, all wealthy, all furious, all ready to tear him apart. Alexander? Margaret Chen, the board chair, said coldly. So glad you could finally join us. Care to explain where you've been for the past 2 weeks? Learning, Alexander said simply. He stood at the head of the table but didn't sit down. Learning what it's like to live in the world our companies create. Learning about the people we exploit for profit. Learning that I've been a parasite feeding off human suffering and calling it business acumen. The room exploded with overlapping voices. Alexander raised a hand, and surprisingly, they quieted. I'm implementing immediate changes across all Reed Ventures companies, he continued. Price reductions, wage increases, benefit expansions, and a complete restructuring of how we do business. Some of you won't like it. Most of you will oppose it. A few of you will try to remove me. That's fine. That's your right. But know this. Every move you make will be public. I've already talked to the media. This conversation we're about to have, it's going to be national news by dinner time. So ask yourselves, do you really want to be the villains who fired a CEO for treating workers fairly? This is blackmail, Richard Pearson sputtered. No, it's accountability, Alexander corrected. For too long, we've operated in the shadows, making decisions that destroy lives and calling it fiduciary responsibility. I'm bringing us into the light. If what we're doing can't stand up to public scrutiny, then we shouldn't be doing it. Margaret leaned back in her chair, studying him with calculating eyes. You've changed. Yes, because of a woman, because of many people, because I finally opened my eyes and saw what I'd become, what we've all become. And you think you can just unilaterally change everything? That's not how corporations work, Alexander. You know that. Then maybe it's time we changed how corporations work. The meeting lasted 4 hours. It was brutal. By the end, 3 board members had resigned in protest. 5 more threatened legal action. But 4, including Margaret, surprisingly, agreed to give him 6 months to implement his changes and prove they could be profitable while also being ethical. 6 months, Margaret said as the others filed out. But Alexander, this better work, because if it doesn't, you won't just lose your position. You'll become a cautionary tale about mixing emotions with business. I'll take that risk. Alone in his office afterward, Alexander looked out at the Manhattan skyline. From up here, the city looked clean, orderly, the struggles and suffering invisible from this height. He picked up his phone and called Sarah. Hey, she answered. I saw the news. You actually did it. You crazy bastard, you actually did it. I told you I would. How do you feel? Terrified, exhilarated. Alive. He paused. Want to have dinner tonight? You, me, and Tommy? Nothing fancy, just dinner. Can't. I work tonight, but tomorrow. We could do breakfast after my shift. It's a date, not a date, he added quickly. Just, a friend date, a breakfast meeting. I'm going to stop talking now. Sarah laughed, and the sound made something warm bloom in Alexander's chest. See you tomorrow, Alexander. And hey, I'm proud of you. I know I've been hard on you, but what you're doing matters. Don't give up. I won't. I promise. Over the next 6 months, Alexander Reed became the most talked about CEO in America. Half the country called him a hero. The other half called him a traitor to capitalism. His personal wealth dropped by over $1 billion as stock prices fluctuated and restructuring costs mounted. But something else happened too. Worker satisfaction at Reed companies increased by 84%. Productivity went up, customer loyalty strengthened, and slowly, very slowly, other companies began to notice. If Reed Ventures could treat workers well and still be profitable, what excuse did everyone else have? Alexander spent less time in boardrooms and more time in hospitals, warehouses, and community centers. He met with workers regularly, listening to their concerns and implementing changes. He became a loud, persistent voice for labor rights and healthcare reform. He was invited to speak at conferences, on news programs, before congressional committees. And through it all, Sarah and Tommy were there. Not as props or inspiration porn, but as friends. Real friends who called him out when he screwed up, celebrated when he got it right, and reminded him why any of this mattered. Tommy thrived in therapy. His grades improved. He joined the debate team and started talking about political science programs at colleges that Sarah could now actually afford to help him attend. The anger was still there, would always be there, probably, but it was focused now, directed at systems instead of people, channeled into purpose. Sarah cut back to 40 hours a week when Reed Medical Supplies price reductions meant the hospital could finally hire adequate staff. She looked younger, lighter, like a weight had been lifted. She started talking about going back to school for her nurse practitioner license. Started dreaming again, instead of just surviving. And Alexander was happy, genuinely, deeply happy in a way he'd forgotten was possible. His penthouse felt empty now, so he spent less time there. His expensive car sat unused because he'd rather take the subway and actually see the city. His designer clothes gathered dust because jeans and a t-shirt worked just fine. He was still wealthy, still powerful, but he was using that wealth and power for something that mattered, and that made all the difference. One evening, exactly 6 months after that first rideshare ride, Alexander stood outside Sarah's building, holding takeout from their favorite Thai place. He'd been doing this twice a week for months now, just showing up, sharing a meal, being present. Tommy let him in. The teenager had grown 3 inches in 6 months and was nearly as tall as Alexander now. "Sarah's running late," he said. "Something about a multi-car accident. Could be another hour. I'll wait." They sat on the couch, eating spring rolls and watching terrible reality TV. Comfortable, easy, family in a way that had nothing to do with blood and everything to do with choice. "Hey, Alexander," Tommy said during a commercial break. "Yeah, I was wrong about you. When you first showed up, I thought you were just another rich guy trying to buy a clear conscience. But you stayed. You actually stayed and did the work. That's pretty cool." Alexander felt his throat tighten. "Thanks, kid. That means a lot. Don't get all emotional on me. I still think billionaires shouldn't exist. I agree with you. Good. Then give away the rest of your money. Working on it, Tommy grinned. Good. When Sarah finally got home at almost 11 p.m., she found them both asleep on the couch. Alexander sprawled awkwardly against the armrest, Tommy's head on his shoulder, the TV still playing. She stood in the doorway for a moment, just looking at them. Her brother, who'd been so angry and lost, now peaceful. And this man, this strange, wealthy, complicated man, who'd somehow become part of their lives. She pulled out her phone and took a picture, not for social media or to show anyone, just for herself. Evidence that this was real, that people could change, that someone from one world could reach into another and find connection, instead of just pity or guilt. Alexander stirred, blinking awake. Hey, sorry we fell asleep. It's fine. Long shift? The longest. How was your day? Good. Hard, but good. The board approved the next round of reforms. We're expanding the changes to international operations. Sarah sat down in the chair across from them, careful not to wake Tommy. You know what's crazy? 6 months ago, I was so angry at people like you. I thought you were all the same. Greedy, selfish, incapable of change. You had every right to think that. I was all those things. But you're not anymore. Or at least, you're trying not to be. And that's what I didn't understand. That people can change if they're willing to do the work. That systems can change if enough people demand it. You changed me, Alexander said quietly. You and Tommy. You didn't fix me. I'm still working on that. And probably will be for the rest of my life. But you showed me that there was something worth fixing. That I could be more than what I'd become. Sarah smiled. We make a good team. Yeah, we do. They sat in comfortable silence, just being together. Outside, the city hummed with life. Millions of stories unfolding simultaneously. People struggling and dreaming and fighting for better tomorrows. And in a small third-floor apartment in Brooklyn, 3 unlikely friends had found something precious. Proof that change was possible. That walls between worlds could be broken down. That humanity could triumph over systems designed to divide. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was still work to do, still battles to fight, still injustices to address. Sarah still worried about money, though less than before. Tommy still struggled with anger, though he was learning to channel it. Alexander still slipped into old patterns sometimes, still had to consciously choose compassion over convenience. But they were trying, together, and that was everything. 3 months later, Alexander received a call from the White House. The president wanted to meet with him, to discuss his worker-focused reforms, and whether they could be implemented on a national scale. It was a huge opportunity. A chance to influence policy at the highest level. He almost said yes immediately. Then he stopped himself and called Sarah first. What do you think? He asked. Should I do it? You're asking me? Of course I'm asking you. Your opinion matters. Sarah was quiet for a moment. I think you should do it. But Alexander, don't go alone. Bring workers with you. Real workers, not just representatives or union leaders. Bring nurses and drivers and teachers. Bring people who live the policies you're trying to change. Make them listen to us, not just talk about us. That's brilliant. I know. And Alexander, if you're going to go to Washington, you should bring Tommy. He's been talking about government and policy nonstop. Let him see how it actually works. Let him meet the people making decisions. It might help him figure out how he wants to fight the system. You're sure? I'm sure. He needs this. We both do. To see that change is possible, that our voices matter. 2 weeks later, Alexander Reed walked into the Oval Office with a delegation that made the president's chief of staff visibly uncomfortable. 5 workers from different industries, including Sarah in her nurse's scrubs, and Tommy in his best button-down shirt. No lawyers, no PR people. Just real people with real stories. The meeting was supposed to last 30 minutes. It went for 2 hours. The president listened, really listened, as Sarah talked about the healthcare crisis from the inside. As a warehouse worker explained impossible quotas and surveillance. As Tommy, brilliant and articulate beyond his 16 years, laid out the case for systemic reform with the precision of a future lawyer. By the end, the president had committed to forming a task force on worker rights and healthcare reform. It wasn't everything. It wasn't nearly enough, but it was a start. On the flight back to New York, Tommy stared out the window at the clouds below, processing everything. That was incredible, he said quietly. We just met the president. We just influenced actual policy. People like us. People exactly like you. Alexander corrected. This is your world too, Tommy. You have just as much right to be in that room as anyone else. More, actually, because you understand what's at stake. I want to do this, Tommy said, turning to look at him. Not just once. I want to make this my life, fighting for change. Making sure people like Sarah don't have to work themselves to death just to survive. Making sure kids like me don't have to grow up angry because the system is designed to keep us down. Then do it. You're smart enough. Determined enough, and now you know it's possible. Sarah reached over and squeezed Tommy's hand. Your parents would be proud of you. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of both of you, Alexander added. You've taught me more about courage and conviction than anyone else in my life. You've made me want to be better. To do better. You're not so bad yourself, Sarah said with a smile. For a billionaire. Former billionaire, Alexander corrected. I'm down to about 2 billion now, and dropping daily. Oh no, Sarah said with mock concern. However, will you survive on only $2 billion? They all laughed, and it felt good, easy, real. The plane touched down at JFK as the sun set over New York City, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. As they gathered their things, Alexander looked at Sarah and Tommy, his unlikely friends, his teachers, his salvation, and felt overwhelming gratitude. 6 months ago, he'd been a billionaire playing at being a driver, looking for something he couldn't name. He'd found it in the backseat of a borrowed Toyota, in the tired eyes of an ER nurse who refused to give up. He'd found purpose, connection, humanity. He'd found a reason to be better. And as they walked through the airport together, a former billionaire CEO, an exhausted but hopeful nurse, and a teenage future lawyer, they were proof that change was possible, that people from different worlds could find common ground, that the walls dividing society could be broken down, one honest conversation at a time. The story didn't end there. It couldn't. Because real change isn't a single moment or a dramatic gesture. It's the daily choice to keep showing up, keep listening, keep fighting for something better. Alexander continued his work, using his remaining wealth and influence to push for systemic reform. Some days were victories, many were defeats, but he kept going. Sarah went back to school, working toward her nurse practitioner license while continuing to advocate for healthcare workers. She testified before committees, wrote op-eds, and refused to let anyone forget that real people were suffering while politicians debated. Tommy graduated high school with honors, got a full scholarship to Columbia, and started organizing campus activism around workers' rights. The anger that had once threatened to consume him became his greatest strength, focused, directed, purposeful, and together, along with thousands of others fighting the same fight, they started to see real change. Not overnight, not without setbacks and frustrations and moments of despair, but change nonetheless. 5 years after that first rideshare ride, Alexander stood in Sarah's new apartment, bigger, brighter, in a neighborhood she chose because she wanted to, not because it was all she could afford, and watched Tommy graduate from college on a laptop screen, the ceremony live-streamed because of a lingering pandemic. He did it, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. Despite everything, he did it. You both did it, Alexander corrected. You kept him together when everything fell apart. You fought for him. You never gave up. We fought together, Sarah said, reaching over to squeeze his hand. You were part of that. Our part of that. Their hands stayed clasped. And in that moment, Alexander realized something he'd been too afraid to acknowledge before. Somewhere along the way, his feelings for Sarah had evolved beyond friendship. Not because she needed rescuing or because he needed redemption, but because she challenged him, inspired him, made him want to be the best version of himself. But before he could say anything, Tommy's face filled the screen, grinning widely, holding up his diploma. "We did it!" he shouted, and a crowd of his friends cheered in the background. The moment passed, but the feeling remained. That night, after the virtual celebrations ended and the congratulations messages stopped flooding in, Alexander and Sarah sat on her balcony, looking out at the Brooklyn skyline. 5 years, Sarah said. Can you believe it's been 5 years since you showed up at the hospital pretending to be a driver? Best decision I ever made, even though it cost you billions of dollars and made half the country hate you, especially because of that. Money and popularity are cheap. This, he gestured between them, toward the city, toward everything they'd built together. This is priceless. Sarah turned to look at him, really look at him, and Alexander felt his heart race in a way that had nothing to do with business or activism. Alexander Reed, she said slowly. Are you about to say something that's going to make this friendship weird? He laughed. Probably. Is that okay? Depends what you're going to say. I'm in love with you, he said simply. I have been for a while now, and I know the timing might be terrible, and I know we have a good thing going and I don't want to ruin it. But Tommy graduated and started his own life and I couldn't go another day without telling you." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Alexander's heart sank. He'd ruined it. He'd taken something beautiful and complicated it with feelings she didn't share. Then she smiled, that brilliant, exhausted, beautiful smile that had first captured his attention 5 years ago. "You know what's funny?" she said. "For the past year, I've been trying to convince myself that what I feel for you is just friendship, just gratitude for everything you've done, just appreciation for how you've helped Tommy and me and so many others. But it's not. It never was. It's not. I love you too, you ridiculous man. I have for a while. I was just scared to admit it because I didn't want to be the cliché. The poor girl who falls for the rich guy who helps her. But this isn't that, is it?" "No," Alexander said firmly. "This is two people who found each other at the right time, who fought together and grew together and became better together. The money has nothing to do with it. Good, because if you ever use your wealth to try to save me again without asking first, I'm done." Noted. Equal partners. Equal partners. They kissed as the city lights twinkled around them, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Not a fairy tale, not a rescue fantasy, just two people who'd found something real in a world that often felt fake. 10 years after that first rideshare ride, Alexander and Sarah stood in the same Brooklyn neighborhood, but everything had changed. The check-cashing place was now a community center funded by Reed Ventures' charitable foundation. The laundromat was still there. Some things should never change, but next to it was a free health clinic where Sarah worked 3 days a week. Tommy, now a hotshot civil rights attorney with a reputation for taking on corporations and winning, stood beside them, along with his husband, Marcus. Yes, that Marcus. The rideshare driver who'd unknowingly started everything by renting his car to a billionaire having an existential crisis. They were there for a dedication ceremony. The city was naming the street after Sarah and Tommy's parents, a small recognition for the family whose tragedy had indirectly sparked a national conversation about workers' rights and healthcare reform. As the mayor unveiled the new street sign, Alexander looked at the crowd gathered around them. Nurses and drivers and teachers and warehouse workers. People whose lives had changed because someone finally listened to them. People who'd fought for themselves and each other. People who proved that change was possible. "You did this," Sarah whispered, leaning into him. "We did this," Alexander corrected. "All of us. Together." That night, back in the home they now shared, not a penthouse, just a comfortable apartment with room for Tommy to visit and space for the family they were building. Alexander lay awake, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. One decision, one ridiculous, impulsive decision to rent a car and pretend to be someone he wasn't. And it had changed everything. He'd gone looking for a way to feel alive and found a purpose. He'd gone looking for anonymity and found connection. He'd gone looking for himself and found something better, a reason to be someone worth finding. Sarah stirred beside him, mumbling something in her sleep about medication dosages and patient charts. She still worked too hard sometimes, still cared too much, still carried the weight of other people's pain, but she was happy. They both were. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. People struggling and dreaming and fighting for better tomorrows. People like Sarah and Tommy and Marcus, proving every day that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. And somewhere out there, in offices and boardrooms and halls of power, the changes they'd started continued to ripple outward. Other companies following Reed Ventures' example, other workers finding their voices, other people realizing that the system could change if enough of them demanded it. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect, but it was better, and that was enough. Alexander closed his eyes, pulled Sarah closer, and fell asleep with a smile on his face, because he'd finally figured out the secret that had eluded him for so long. Life wasn't about accumulating wealth or power or status. It was about connection, purpose, fighting for something that mattered with people you loved. It was about being fully, messily, beautifully human. And for the first time in his life, Alexander Reed, former billionaire, recovering workaholic, occasional rideshare driver, and permanent work in progress, was exactly that, the end.